Sahana Vavatu Sahano Vunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, of course, we're reading and discussing Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. We're on chapter 13, which is titled Immortality. And we've reached that place in the talk where he's discussing this appearance of birth and death. This appearance of birth and death. Because that's how he characterizes it. Before we go ahead, are there any comments or questions that anyone would like to make about what we've read so far, or anything else having to do with this? Anything from your own wisdom or experience? Any concern or question you'd like to raise? All right. What is the page again, Haima?
It's page 263, last few lines, Brother Shankara, you said.
That's where I'm going to start, yes. Page 263. What is this coming and going? It is the hallucination produced by the change of this fine body, which you call the mind. Now, fine body is also known as the subtle body. So he says there's a change. There's a change in it, which you call the mind. That is going on, just a little speck of cloud passing before the sky. That's how he's characterizing the individual subtle body or mind. Just a little speck of cloud passing before the sky. As it moves on and on, it may create the delusion that the sky moves. Now, it's very interesting that Nisargadatta Maharaj used this exact same metaphor of the tiny speck. He didn't say sky, he said foggy dreamscape. But just this tiny speck moving through this foggy dreamscape. And so it gives the illusion that there is movement. It may create the delusion that the sky moves, that there is movement, in other words. And notice that the Swami just flat out calls it a hallucination. What is this coming and going? It is the hallucination produced by the change of this fine or subtle body, which you call the mind. That is going on. Just a little speck of cloud passing before the sky. As it moves on and on, that is through many lifetimes, it may create the delusion that the sky is moving. In other words, that there is some actual movement as you move from apparent lifetime to apparent lifetime. Sometimes you see a cloud moving before the moon, and you think that the moon is moving. When you're in a train, you think the land is flying. Or when you're in a boat, you think that the water moves. We've all had that sensation, I'm sure. In reality, you are neither in reality, you are neither going nor coming. You are not being born, nor going to be reborn. You are infinite, ever present. So I'm going to start that sentence again. In reality, you are neither going nor coming. You are not being born nor going to be reborn. You are infinite, ever present, beyond all causation, and ever free. Now, before we go on, is there anything that needs clarification? Or is there anything you'd like to observe from your own experience that causes you to believe or disbelieve what the Swami just said?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
So, it's the fine body that I guess moves on after
Appears to move on.
appears to move on. But if we have not had that realization of being the absolute, but we pray fervently that we don't want to be reborn, then will that subtle mind get like dissolved, or what happens?
It depends on your state of being within time, space, and causation, within what the Swami is characterizing as a hallucination or delusion. There is this apparent reality. And such as Sri Ramakrishna, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Rama, they all take part in it. They are part of time, space, and causation. Ishvara, Ishwari, the divine being. So what does it say in the evening prayer? That Sri Ramakrishna, how great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Now, that liberation, that setting you free, may take the form of total dissolution, dissolve, as you asked, or it may be that you are in a state of growth to where you need to go to what is called, you need to take the so-called solar path or the path of the saints. And so the delusion or hallucination continues because you're not quite finished with it yet. Though you no longer need to take a human body to sustain this hallucination, you do still need some unfolding or growth, or however you choose to see it. Now, if you read the book Love Poems from God, these are all people in that state. They may have had a transcendental experience, but they returned to their saintly form. And Sri Ramakrishna says this is due, and as you can see it clearly in those poems, it is due to this slight trace of the ego of knowledge or the ego of love or devotion. They come back. Otherwise, there would be no teachers for those of us who are in this hallucinatory or delusionary state. There would be no rescue for us. So Sri Ramakrishna himself comes So if you pray fervently and sincerely, according to everything said in the Gita, your prayer will be answered. But just exactly how, Krishna explains gives some details. Sri Ramakrishna also gives some details. And Sri Ramakrishna said plainly that he had set up within time, space, and causation. There is nothing, we can't name anything unless it's within time, space, and causation. He said he had set up Ramakrishna Loka, which is a special place for those who have taken his particular path, so that your continued unfolding, your continued growth into full realization can take place with him.
Thank you.
And if through the grace of Ramakrishna, he lets us into the Ramakrishna Loka, would we be free from rebirth after that?
Absolutely, yes. And it's it is a grace. You're right, but it isn't a grace that will be given or withheld if you are sincere. It isn't that you merit it. It's simply that your heart has changed to where you no longer wish to be part of this earthly, this human body form of time, space, and causation. Is that little poem quoted in a couple of recent talks? Being, creating, doing, sharing, the joys of these is why we're here. When you're truly tired of this, just sign off and head for home. And so that's this signing off and heading for home may include this. It certainly will mean taking the solar path. The lunar path is the path of the fathers. It leads to rebirth. It certainly will mean taking the solar path and living among the other saintly beings that are unfolding and growing toward their final realization. Very good questions and very, very on point as to what the Swami is talking about here. Anything more? So I'm going to repeat this last statement that the Swami said, which, if we take it seriously, is an invitation to become or realize what he is saying. You are infinite, ever present, beyond all causation, and ever free. You, each of us sitting here this evening, you are infinite, ever present, beyond all causation, and ever free, which is exactly what is meant by that famous saying from the Upanishads, Tattvamasi, that thou art. That being that which is infinite, ever present, beyond all causation, and ever free. Mind you, the Swami was standing in front of a crowd of people, probably in San Francisco. It doesn't say, but I'm betting this talk was given in San Francisco. And telling them this. Who is telling them this? Well, Sri Ramakrishna said that the being who appeared to us as Vivekananda was an ever-free soul. So he was speaking not from text, not from somebody else's knowledge, but from his own knowledge. Anything at all from anyone? Okay. Such a question is out of place. It is errant nonsense. How could there be mortality when there was no birth? How could there be mortality when there was no birth? This, of course, he's referring to some things that were said earlier about such a question. But the question was about mortality. How could there be mortality when there was no birth? One step more we will have to take to come to a logical conclusion. And the Swami, bless him, always wants to come to a logical conclusion. Nothing that he says can be illogical. He says it always must conform to the rules of logic. It cannot be in some way a fantasy or some speculation or some superstition. No. One step more we will have to take to come to a logical conclusion. There is no halfway house. I didn't remember that phrase. There is no halfway house. You are not, you are metaphysicians, and there is no crying quarter. He's just said, thou art that, tatvamasi. There is no halfway house. You can't say, I have 1 foot here and 1 foot there. No. You are metaphysicians, and there is no crying quarter. If then we are beyond all law, we must be omniscient, ever blessed. All knowledge must be in us. So let me start that again, just so we get very clear what he's saying about the truth of your being. If then we are beyond all law, that is limitation. That's what he means by by law. If then we are beyond all limitation, we must be omniscient, ever blessed. All knowledge must be in us, and all power and blessedness. So once again, these are such powerful statements, and they are so ground shaking. The ground that we stand on in our everyday life shakes. This is why he says, don't be frightened. He's shaking the very ground we stand on as we live our everyday life. And don't think the Swami didn't have an everyday life. He did. As a human being, when he took human form, he was liable to all of the hallucinatory attachments. That was the particular thing, because he so loved people that he became attached to them, and it became a real issue for him. So this is ground shaking. The ground beneath our feet shakes when we're told these things. If then we are beyond all law, or beyond all limitation, we must be omniscient, ever blessed. All knowledge must be in us, and all power and blessedness. So is there anything that anyone would like to comment from their own wisdom or experience, or that they'd like to offer as a concern or question. I mean, this is the core of Jnana Yoga. You are that.
Swami is telling us, Brother Shankara, that it seems it's all in the self-realization, realizing ourselves. We see all of this. Is that right? Am I correct?
Yes, and he will acknowledge that it doesn't happen all at once for most.
Sure.
But it definitely, even he had a growth process from the time he was a teenage boy and was a very puritanical, and as he said, I was a fanatic in those days. He wouldn't walk on the same side of the street where there were theaters, because the kind of people who frequented the theater and the people who acted in the theater were of low moral character. That was how he saw it. At the end of his life, he said, I could live in a brothel and not see anything amiss. Because he saw only the divine, only the omnipresent, the omniscient everywhere. So yes, it is this process of self-realization that gets us. And that's why I said, you may come to the end of having to take human form, but you may not be altogether through with your unfoldment and your and all of the knots of the heart may not have been entirely loosed, so that anything else, dears? All right. You know, I can say for myself, just speaking for myself, having heard this, I no longer have any excuse for justifying this hallucination. It doesn't need any justification, but you know, the mind constantly goes on justifying, rationalizing, saying, well, I'm doing this because of that, and we go on and on with that. But there is, having heard this, if we expose ourselves to this, then we have to begin to call it all into question and do that process of saying, okay, perhaps I'm really, truly tired of this. It's time for me to sign off and head for home. Home, of course, is full self-realization, as Haima pointed out. No longer any concerns or doubts or limitations. And so the Swami says, certainly, you are the omnipresent, omniscient being of the universe. You are the omniscient, omnipresent being of the universe. But of such beings, can there be many? But of such beings, can there be many? Can there be 100,000 millions of omniscient beings? Certainly not. This is what he means when he says earlier that the appearance of 100,000 millions of us is an hallucination. It is a delusion. It is a dream. And so we are together tonight to help one another gain the information and the conviction to dispel this dream. And there's great help, not only from Vivekananda, but from his master, Sri Ramakrishna. How great was thy sacrifice, Vivekananda wrote of Sri Ramakrishna. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. So this prison, our iron age, this system of limitation and suffering and so on, Sri Ramakrishna came out of his own sweet will as Ishvara, part and acknowledging himself as part of the time, space, and causation of Maya, Vidya Maya, that knowledge that sets us free, but nevertheless part of Maya. So can there be 100,000 millions of omniscient, omnipresent beings? Certainly not. Then what becomes of us all? You are only one. There is only one such self. One. One. We don't see it, but the Swami is saying that's the truth. That includes this lovely cat that is with Brahmadas, Shiva. One. One, only one. You are only one. There is only one such self. And that one self is you, standing behind this little nature. Standing behind this little nature is what we call the soul. There is only one being, one existence, the ever-blessed, the omnipresent and omniscient, the birthless, deathless. There is only one being, one existence, the ever-blessed, the omnipresent, the omniscient, the birthless, the deathless. And then he gives a quote. Through his control, the sky expands. Through his control, the air breathes. Through his control, the sun shines. And through his control, all live. He is the reality in nature. He is the soul of your soul. Nay, more, you are he. You are one with him. Now, it's important to remember that way back, maybe chapter 6 or 7, the Swami explained that the divine being did this. And of course, we know this is so from the scriptures and from what Krishna says in the Gita, which is, of course, another kind of scripture, but I meant the Shruti, the Vedas, the Upanishads, that which was heard as the truth. We, the divine being, created this Maya. Swami Sarvapriyananda, giving a talk recently on moksha, was asked why the divine presence, the cosmic intelligence, did this. And he said, oh, the answer is very American, because it can. So there's no one else to look to, no one, we can't point and say, that divine being did this to me. No, that divine being is you, as the Swami is pointing out. And we created this. And as Sri Ramakrishna says, it's all the same Brahman. Brahman still, Nirguna Brahman. Brahman in waves, Saguna Brahman. Brahman with the attributes of the gunas. But it's all one. It is all one. He said that is the special knowledge that comes, Vijnana. And that is, of course, what we would unfold in ourselves if we were in a state of being where we no longer needed to learn through taking human birth, but there were still things for us to learn. We would learn, in a sense, Sri Ramakrishna tries to explain. It's beyond thought and speech, so he really can't, but he tries to explain how and why this happened. He calls it the mother's sport and so on. And Holy Mother, Sri Sharda Devi, herself gave an explanation. So we're coming to the wind-up here. Anything remain unclear, or any doubts or concerns, or anything you'd like to offer from your own experience about how this is unfolding for you? He, and by the way, when Swami uses the term he, that's just a convention of speech. The omnipresent, omniscient, eternal, infinite being, it does not have any gender. Gender comes with the manifestation, with the delusion. So when he said he is the reality, he doesn't mean a masculine being. He is the reality in nature. He is the soul of your soul. Nay, more, you are he. You are one with him. Wherever there are two, there is fear, there is danger, there is conflict, there is strife. When it is all one, who is there to hate? Who is there to struggle with? Now, that is such an important point about our own lives. If we see ourselves as the one, and we see everyone else and everything else as also the one, then no matter how they behave, I mean, we have a society, and of course, there have to be the social rules to keep people from being abusive of one another and breaking the law, as it were. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what you see. When you see there is one, only one. And so all thought of judgment, of I hate that, I like this. You may in fact like this, but that's just another way of distracting yourself from the truth. And it's not that you shouldn't do it, it's just that if you want to proceed along this path, you will ultimately free yourself from it. Wherever there are two, the idea of two, there is fear, there is danger, there is conflict, there is strife. When it is all one, who is there to hate? Who is there to struggle with? When it is all he, with whom can you fight? This explains the true nature of life. This explains the true nature of being. This is perfection. and all this is God. Now, does it seem like perfection to our human minds? No, of course not. As the Swami said in the very early talks, we are eons old. This hallucination, this dream of Brahmans, this Brahman's dream, has been going on for, physicists tell us, 14 billion years. And we were born with the birth of that creation, that manifestation. And so we have been accumulating what are called mental impressions or samskaras or vasanas, or what Jill Bolte Taylor calls neural loops, since then. Even before there was such a thing as a mind apart from all other minds, there was the generation of the impressions of how manifestation works, which of course the scientists are working hard at unraveling now. It's in their awareness, in their consciousness, slowly and slowly they're unraveling. Of course, it's a quixotic task, because as Swami Prabhupada pointed out, as worthy as science is, it is like trying to empty the ocean of consciousness with a teaspoon. The finite mind will never grasp the infinite. As some of you have heard me say, this has become a favorite quote of mine from St. Thomas Aquinas, because there's something so funny and poignant about it. He says, draw a circle around all of creation, all you know of creation. Draw a circle around that, and God can barely fit a toe there. So when we begin to know our infinite, omnipresent, omniscient nature, this is when all these limitations begin to drop away, dissolve, and life changes, because we are beyond that kind of law. Those we see ourselves, we begin to unfold Vidyamaya and see that we are beyond limitation. Anything else, dears? Anything that anyone would like to say or ask?
So, the mind is obviously not going to get easily convinced. So, it's the constant practice, concentration, um, contemplation, meditation.
Yes, exactly, dear.
So,
Because the truth is in silence. It's not in the chatter of the mind. The Swami is chattering away at us, and he would say so himself. I'm not minimizing what he's doing. He's chattering away at us, mind to mind. But what he's trying to do is persuade us to take these ideas inside and let them sink deep in us, so that we then sink below the level of the chatter and all the ideas, and we begin to see the truth of which he speaks within ourselves, and we begin to sense that we are indeed the one, and that there is no barrier, but so then we have to deal with the practical consequences. This is what is meant by Viveka and Vairagya. Having come to some conclusion about the truth of our being and nature, then we have to begin that process of signing off. That's what it's meant in that little poem by just sign off. Just begin to release all of the attachments. But you cannot do that. As Tukaram says, he's so funny. He says, only a fool. This is the poet Tukaram. He lived in India. I've forgotten the century, some hundreds of years ago. He said, only a fool would kick his lover out of bed unless he knew he had two better ones on the way. You're not going to renounce what you know and what has sustained you until you truly believe there is something better, something more. And that comes through the experience, as you said, of contemplation, concentration, and meditation. Or it may come to you in a flash. As Sri Ramakrishna says, Mother holds the key. It may come to you in a flash. When it does come to you in a flash, then the task becomes to hold on to it, to make it your own. All of Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples were given realization. Brahmananda, Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother's spiritual son, was in Rishikesh. And someone that he knew from the Kolkata area found him there and said, what are you doing this for, Swami? The master gave you everything. And he said, yes, but I must make it my own. And this process is very nicely described in the last two chapters of Adi Shankaracharya's Vivekachudamani. Having had the realization of the truth, capital T truth, it becomes your task to hold on to it. Because this dream of Brahman, which is also called Mahamaya, is not called that for nothing. It will do everything it can, as the Swami said earlier, to insist on itself. He said so earlier in this talk. It will be deliberately delusory. Thank you, Swayam. Anything else? Any other comments or questions?
So what we are doing now is contemplation.
Well, what we're doing now is Shravana. We're also, we're hearing the Swami. This is Shravana. The way this congregation works is that we also do the manana together. This is studying the art of spirituality together. And that's why in the opening prayer, it refers to strength and skill. We must have the conviction and the mental skill to make this, to take it beyond simply something we're hearing to something that we're assimilating. That's what manana means. When we take food, it has to be digested before the good of the food becomes useful to our bodies. That's exactly what we're doing here. So we're doing both the Shravana, listening to the Swami's astounding assertions. I mean, if they're not astounding, what could possibly be astounding? You are not what you think you are. You are that one omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent being. Now you've heard it. You've heard it from him and then rephrased from me. Now what? Now what? We have to become convinced that we are truly tired of this way of being, creating, doing, and sharing. It isn't as if there's anything wrong with that. It's just very limited. Just the fact that we have words for it and can describe it lets you know. So yes, we're doing the manana, the contemplation, along with the shravana. Thank you for bringing that up, Swami. Any follow-on or anything else from anyone?
Thank you.
I mean, that's the way this congregation works, and it is unusual among the congregations, even Vedanta congregations in the United States. And it's because of this opening prayer. It's the legacy of Swami Vivekananda. Swami Yogeshananda. Swami Yogeshananda is the one that translated that prayer in that way. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. So it was in contemplating that this way of being together is our attempt to make that a reality. And we do a pretty good job of it, I think. Certainly it's very satisfying from here. Anyone else have anything at all to offer? Okay, dears. When it is all one, who is there to hate? Who is there to struggle with? When it is all he, with whom can you fight? This explains the true nature of life. This explains the true nature of being. This is perfection, and this is God. And this is why Christ said, resist not evil. He doesn't mean let some other man beat your wife. That's not what he meant at all. He meant just exactly what this Swami says here. This is perfection, and this is God. As long as you see the many, you are under delusion. So let's just ingest that. As long as you see the many, you are under delusion. We, as we sit here this evening, must say, I am under this delusion. But I am here this evening in order to learn what I need to know to untie the knots of the heart that keep that delusion persistent in me. As long as you see the many, you are under delusion. And then there's another quote. In this world of many, he who sees the one in this ever-changing world, he who sees him who never changes as the soul of his soul, his own soul, as the soul of his own soul, as his own self, he is free. He is blessed. He has reached the goal. It's the end of the quote. It's from one of the Upanishads, but I don't know which one. In this world of many, it's probably from the Mandukya. In this world of many, he who sees the One in this ever-changing world, he who sees him who never changes as the soul of his own soul, as his own self, he is free. He is blessed. He has reached the goal. No, I think it's from the Kata. It's Yama teaching Nachiketa. Therefore know that thou art he. Therefore know that thou art he, which is, he's just now quoting from the Chandogya Upanishad, what Uddalaka tells his son, that thou art. Therefore know that thou art he. Thou art the God of this universe. Tattvamasi, there it is, that thou art. That's what Uddalaka actually says to his son. Therefore know that thou art he. Thou art the God of this universe. Tattvamasi, that thou art. All these various ideas that I am a man or a woman, or sick or healthy, or strong or weak, or that I hate or I love or have a little power, are but hallucinations. They are the temporary way of our being. All these various ideas that I am a man or a woman, or sick or healthy, or strong or weak, or that I hate or love, or I love, or have a little power, are but hallucinations. Away with them. Away with them. What makes you weak? What makes you fear? You are the one being in the universe. What frightens you? Stand up then and be free. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. I think it might be productive if we did have more discussion of what's been said and your reactions to it. It's not a demand, it's just an invitation. But I do think it would be productive because the Swami has said these astounding things and said them so bald-facedly.
Namaste, Brother Shankara. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste, Shankara.
Since you gave an invitation, I was just thinking about this and I would like to share. When Swamiji says that there is really one, and the one who, from Katha Upanishad or whichever Upanishad, that the one who sees one in all has reached the goal. And we all know that there are several people who live lives from Ramakrishna order monks or some other monks or saints in the last 50 years, 100 years, or whatever time. They see that, they experience that. But in my life, it is so difficult. Now, my observation is that most of these people lived a very contemplative life, because I can hold the idea that we are all one in my mind when I'm working, and I try to live by dharma, following all the rules and being, taking care of everything. And yes, there is some achievement in that. There is some peace achieved. There is some stability of mind achieved. But that true experience to have, one needs to go deeper into it. Now I look at people like Nisargadatta Maharaj, who was a businessman and who lived in Mumbai, where there was so much of hustle and bustle around. But he was able to achieve that with his grace of Guru, and he was tenacious about it. But I'm a very common man, you know. These are exceptions. So I would like to get everybody's thought on it. What do they think? You know, yours and everybody. How do we go next step? How do we go further in this?
Thank you, Shailesh, and thank you for being so straightforward. Yes, we all can identify with all of what you said, I think. And so, does anyone want to respond to what Shailesh just invited us to say?
Um, I absolutely agree that it is extremely difficult, but as I was listening to that last few sentences, at least for the moment, I mean, it does take away the fear. It does take away the weakness. So I guess I don't remember the exact quote, but Swami Vivekananda said something to the effect of just keep repeating it to yourself until
Yes, that's what he
every
said in Inspired Talks.
yeah.
He says exactly what you just said. Just don't be relentless. Just keep repeating the truth to yourself. So yes, any more, Swayam?
No, that's it. I think he said something like every cell in your body tingles with this or something like that. Can't
Yes.
remember.
And the reason he says that is because he knows we are beings made of vibration. And the truth expressed in vibration actually changes the cells of our bodies.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And it is one of the reasons that the mantras are there. The mantras, as you may know, contain something called bijas, seed words. They're called seeds for a reason. You plant them in your awareness by repeating them, and they grow, and their effect grows. And you begin to feel it in your very being, and slowly, and as Swami Sridharananda says, and he knows this is not something that he thinks is true, he knows it's true, slowly and slowly it transforms you. So when we do the work and we're relentless and dauntless about it, when we don't let our delusionary doubts and fears overcome us, and that doesn't mean you won't miss a day here and there, of course you will. But day after day after day, when you get up, you remind yourself of the truth in whatever way is appropriate for you. You remind yourself of the truth. You offer the day to the divine presence within yourself and the ever presence. And then you go forward in your day trying to keep that recollectedness. Trying to keep that recollectedness. The truth is this. I'm experiencing this very well. This is the dream of Brahman. It also is the truth. I just can't see the truth in it yet. Sri Ramakrishna says it is all the truth, but it seems like a delusion. Very tricky stuff, no two ways about it. It's not called walking on the razor's edge for nothing. But the wonderful thing about walking on the razor's edge is it's only a few inches to the ground of our ordinary daily awareness and being. So we step down onto that, okay, As Vivekananda said, you fall 1,000 times, you rise 1,001 times. So you get back on the razor's edge. Anything else from anyone?
That's my response too, Brother Shankara. With faith, meditate, meditate, meditate. Continue to keep on doing. Over the years, we stop reacting, we start responding, and we give up that adversarial attitude towards the world and people around us. I think you mentioned sometime back this, and that does happen. I mean, we may fall back, like Vivekananda says. We may fall down every now and then, but we do recover quickly if we continue that meditation over time. We get that feeling. You experience it.
So very well said, Jaime.
And then you continue to do your daily duties and all other things, but you don't react to things. You kind of respond with harmony from your heart. Respond with harmony.
This I, me, mine, which is why in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the first limb or first step of yoga is the yamas. Consciously restraining yourself from this adversarial attitude toward the world and everything in it that says, I have to take from the world to satisfy I, me, mine. And that may include your family. You may feel like I'm doing this for my family.
And also we learn to forgive the unforgivable people.
Yes.
We learn, it automatically comes to you as you move forward with the meditation. Slowly, slowly, then you start connecting with people. I'm not any different from him or her. He's not any different from me or her or him. And we're all one, but we perceive things differently. That's why we see the world differently.
Yes.
And each one perceives differently, but it's the same reality. It's perceived by many people, many different ways. That's what I experience.
Thank you, Jaime. You're so right. And it was so beautifully said, what you just said about the unforgivable and so on. It was so beautifully expressed by St. Francis of Assisi. He said, true love and compassion can only flow from your eyes and lips when you admit, I too am capable of any act. I had wondered for years how Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, how Mr. Rogers could say to everyone with that truth and conviction that he said it, I like you just the way you are.
Yes.
And when I came across that quote from St. Francis of Assisi, I thought, there it is. It's when you too admit, I'm capable of anything, so how can I judge others? How can I not say, yes, who you are, where you are, how you are, is just fine with me.
Right. And St. Francis also said, where there is hatred, let me sow love. And I think that does come to us too over time, slowly, slowly practicing our meditation practices. There will not be hatred in your heart.
Well, it comes from the realization of what Swamiji has said just a little while back. When you recognize there is one, only one, who is there to hate, to struggle with, to fight? Who is there? No. Praiser praised, praiser praised, blamer blamed are one. That's from Swami Vivekananda's Song of the Sannyasa. Anything else from anyone, dears?
Yeah, that's all, Brother Shankara. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jaime. Anything else? All right, dears, we'll leave it at that until next week. I'll repeat that little poem. Being, creating, doing, sharing. The joys of these is why we're here. When you are truly tired of this, just sign off and head for home. Until you're truly tired of it, you can take a stand for the truth. But if you're not truly tired of being, creating, doing, and sharing, which is a little summary of the content of Brahman Stream, if you're not truly tired of that, you're not going to be willing to make the effort. Why? Because you're enjoying yourself. Yes, there's suffering along with it. So Swami Vivekananda is talking to us about the ideal. And there's every reason to take that ideal seriously and assimilate it. Do the manana. This is the way we convince ourselves of the futility of trying to gain true happiness and freedom in the life of the world, in the life of this hallucination or delusion. It is ultimately futile. This is what Yama tells, when Nachiketa finally says, I'm not going to settle for anything else. You might as well just go ahead and tell me the truth. And so Yama says, all right, the truth is you already know because you didn't take my temptations as I offered them. You already know that it is futile to try to be truly happy or truly free in the life of time, space, and causation. So you must go beyond it. But when we're not ready to go beyond it, we must not say to ourselves, there's something bad and wrong with me. No, not in the least. Of course, we must not harm others in living the life of being, creating, doing, and sharing. Of course, because as long as we are able to hurt others, we're still in that adversarial frame of reference, and the karma will come back to bite us. Suffering will be there. Any last thought from anyone?
I was just a quick note I would like to add. Did anyone speak?
No, go ahead, Shailesh. If anyone wants to speak, they can speak after you.
Just a quick note. I was watching an NDE video today, a near-death experience of a person who actually, the experience was that after this person he passed away, he actually went to a place where there was a mandala and they were all living beings ever produced or ever born. And everything was perfect. And then he was told that this is just a play. Everything is just a play because everybody is one. And then there is a review of life. And it says that this is what you played, good or bad. And now the person himself says that, okay, I played a bad character and I'm going to go and play a good character and experience that badness. And so it kind of cancels the idea of hell, but it actually, you go back here and experience it. So anyway, apart from that, what I was more impressed was that it's just a play. And we have to remember that it's a play. And the more that comes to your mind, it becomes more easier to let it go. I think it was a very good, something good I learned from that experience, that video.
Very good, Shailesh. Very good indeed. And excellent, everything you said. It is indeed a play. This is what Sri Ramakrishna says over and over. This is Mother's play. Mother is the instrument for creating Brahman's dream. Brahman says, I am one, I shall become many. The day of Brahma begins some 100 billion years or more of this day of Brahma. And, this idea of the divine feminine comes in as the instrument with her three gunas to produce this play as this mandala. There's a mandala on the wall here that represents Mother, and the play. It's an aid to meditation. So yes to everything you said, Shailesh. Wonderful. Anything else? Someone else did want to speak when Shailesh started speaking?
Yes, you had mentioned the adversarial desire to harm others. And when we feel those thoughts, we want to harm those who harmed us. How can we elevate ourselves above that to ahimsa?
Well, the first thing to do is remind yourself of the truth. And then the second, the truth that is one, only one. And that person that I want to harm is also me. Then there is the very practical Vedantic response. And that is, as long as I'm in that frame of reference, where I have this I, me, mine attitude of I want to take vengeance, then the karma will come to me. It won't go to the divine. Krishna says, I'll take it if you'll let me. But no, then if you do react, and Haima used exactly the right word, if you react in that way, then you're just keeping the game going. Someone else will come back and deliver your karma to you. And you will feel this bite again of someone's being vengeful and harmful to you. So it's up to us to break the cycle. We have to break the cycle and say, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this vengefulness. And yes, people will deliver our past karma to us. And so we say, that's my karma. All right, now it's over and done with. This is something that Holy Mother points out emphatically. Once some karma, somebody does harm you, well, it isn't that particular thing is not going to happen again. That's over with. So you don't have to respond. You don't have to harm the messenger who delivered your karma. So that's the truth that we remind ourselves. The first truth is that there is one, only one. There's only one flesh to harm. There's only one being. The second truth is that unless I break the cycle of this back and forth, this I cut you with my sword and then you or some other messenger cuts me with theirs, it'll just go on. And the bleeding and the suffering will continue. So that's the second truth to remind yourself. Does that get it, Ramadas?
Yes, I think so. This takes willpower.
Oh
We gotta
yes.
remind
Well,
ourselves of this.
what it takes Brahmadas, is recollection in the moment.
Mhm.
This is why we try to keep these thoughts uppermost in our mind. And it is not easy, you're right, particularly when somebody comes at us and really cuts us with their sword. It's hard not to pull ours out of our scabbard and go back after them. But
Yeah.
that is just self-defeating. It
I guess,
just
Brother Shankara, I was
Yeah.
thinking, is that same as, first of all, accept everything as part of the play, like you said a while ago.
well, Shailesh said it, yes.
And then I know what you mean exactly is sometimes it's easier to forgive, but not easy to forget, you know?
Well, there's no necessity to forget. I mean, these mental impressions are here. We can call them back if we wish. But the forgiveness comes from this acknowledgement of there being one only one, that whatever was done to me, this was a messenger delivering my karma. And so I forgive them for having to take on that terrible task. And then we let it go. But it doesn't mean we forget it.
That's what
Everything remains in our subtle bodies.
But when it comes to the conscious awareness, is how we deal with it that
Yes.
matters.
Well, that's where Haima spoke so eloquently earlier. You know, we must respond, not react. We must restrain our tendency to react, and then allow ourselves to present the most auspicious response. Be our best self, is the way therapists often put it.
Shankara, can I add one little thing to it?
Please, please, please do.
It's like if we meet the evil with the evil, then the more evil comes. If we meet the evil with peace, like walking away or just calmly move away from that evil, then at least the other person will have a chance to realize, or may not, but we change. They may not change. Our attitude changes, we feel liberated. That's what I meant. Because we
Yes.
don't want to meet the evil with the evil, because that only becomes a bigger evil monster.
Yes. Well, we can just remind ourselves of the futility of it. All we're trying to do is create a false kind of happiness within this delusion. How can you create something real, lasting, and satisfying out of a delusion? You cannot. It's futile. It's absolutely 100% futile. And so when we get that idea firmly in mind, that the only true happiness I'm going to achieve is in these higher ideas, which are resident within us, waiting to be uncovered or discovered. Then we begin, and it comes with, the first thing it comes with is this sense of blissfulness that comes with doing your mantra or whatever practice you get a peacefulness in your body. And you think, oh, this is sweet. That's just the beginning. That's just That's just a taste. But as Sri Chaitanya says, after a time, tasting his nectar at every step, bathing in his name, that bath for weary souls. What is bathing in his name? It's purification. So that we don't react. We don't harm. Slowly and slowly. And we must not be impatient with ourselves. When we don't actualize the ideal, as Swami Swahananda would say over and over to us, what's done is done. Go forward. Don't spend time thinking about it. Take the lesson that you can from it and then go forward. And he would make this wonderful gesture. Go forward. He published a book of some letters he received from Swami Paramehananda. It's called Go Forward. You can find that book. It's a wonderful book of the Swami's instruction on how to do just what I said. Let go what just happened, no matter how dramatic, let it go and go forward. Thank you, Haima.
I just would like to add something, just a thought about if someone, I had an experience, someone comes and hurts you and it hurts you, like Niraji was saying, it takes time sometimes. I mean, you forgive and then it stays on your mind, but we should not put our foot down saying that, no, nothing is happening to me, nothing is happening. If something happens, let it happen. Because that's how I mean, I'm not preaching you, but I'm just saying it to myself, that it takes time. Like I remember I spoke to there was a colleague and he had an older brother, and his older brother, so I met his mom and she was really, she was not in good, she was okay, but not, I could see it. So he said, my older brother died when he was 15 years old. It took my mom another 15 years to forget that and become normal. So whatever the law of karma or whatever happened, I learned such a big lesson that things happen and you cannot do anything about it. And you have to accept that there is a time frame. I have to be in this. And the moment you accept that I'm going to suffer for whatever time this is going to be, it relieves actually a lot. And it helps reduce that time frame. That's my experience, because I had a very bad experience this week and someone said something and it stayed on my mind. And now it's after a couple of days, it just went away 80-90%, I would say. So you just watch your mind. Sometimes it just helps. but it is difficult for those first 2 days.
Oh yes, we've all had that experience, Shailesh, and that was very, very well said, what you just offered. Thank you for that.
I think what happens over time is the intensity of the pain goes down and you get healthier and healthier in your mind, because the higher thoughts take place of the lower thoughts that you were having earlier,
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, that's true.
And it depends on our level of effort. If you are relentless and dauntless, if you start and if you can end every day with some deliberate spiritual practice, and then during the rest of the day, maintain recollectedness as best you can, it transforms you. It transforms you. So,
thank you.
All right. So there's that little poem, but then there's this. Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So that's the prayer. I'm sure you all share it, that we all of us who gather like this, we wish this for one another. So a sweet good night. This is the last class of the week until Saturday. We'll take up Swami Prabhavananda's talk on silence. And then Sunday, there will be a discussion of a very short but very powerful chapter of the Gita, chapter 12, the Yoga of Devotion. So that's what will be discussed on Sunday. That chapter, though very short, 3.5 pages only, in Swami Prabhavananda's translation, it's action-packed. So, good night, dears, until we meet again.
Yes.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. There we are, dears. I think that was Roy Rogers or the other guy that became the baseball mogul. Anyway, it's a sweet tune. Good night.
Good night.
Right.